coming, the sun's zooming in, meltdown expected, the wheat is good there, engines stop running, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning. I live by the river.
Hello everyone and welcome to the By the Minute Arsenal podcast. We're back again. It doesn't seem like very long since the last one, but we're back on our Monday schedule now. I am Matt H, and with me as usual we have Matt V. Hello Matt.
Good evening. Getting used to doing this as a sort of counselling session after a stressful weekend.
It is becoming a bit like that, isn't it? Although generally speaking, at least it ends okay, but we see that it could go wrong. And we've also again got Pete. Hello Pete.
Hello there, Matt. I'm Matt, and I'm much less traumatised too.
Good. Well, we'll probably have a relatively swift pod today, just to catch up with the FA Cup action and preview the Swansea game. So first of all, Preston last Saturday evening, 1-0 down to 2-1 up. Terrible in the first half. I don't think I'm giving away any secrets when I say that. One team of invincibles against another, although it's been some years for both of them since that was true. Well, I don't know where to start. Let's start with Matt. Matt, what about that game, particularly that shambolic first half?
Yeah, clearly the team recognised that we're very good at first half, very good at comebacks. So it has led to a few very interesting first halves. Defensively, it was pretty terrible. Mustafi looks not as sharp as he was before his injury. Maitland-Niles, I mean, it's pretty unfair to criticise him, considering he was just coming in, but he was pretty isolated at times. And Gabriel reduced himself to effectively trying to launch an offside trap single-handedly by jumping up every time he could, which we were saved once by a dreadful offside call, and the second time they probably should have scored where they squared it and their striker couldn't get there. So, yeah, we were a bit all over the place defensively and didn't have a lot going forward either in the first half. But I think towards the end of the first half, the sort of last 5 or 10 minutes, we picked it up going forward. And then obviously the second half was a lot better.
It was. I mean, yeah, Preston could have, my note says buried the game potentially in the first half. I mean, that might be a slight exaggeration, but it wasn't so much they had any more chances than a team might normally have in a game. It's that we were so shambolic. Maitland-Niles was isolated is exactly, it was ridiculous that, he's in that position. He was, there's only so much one young lad can do against, as we suggested, a half decent Preston team given their position in the division. Pete, your thoughts, particularly if you like to pick a different subject about going behind within the first 10 minutes again.
I thought we did a great job of keeping us all on our toes. Just reminding us how good we are at this comeback thing, basically. But yeah, I mean, at half time, it felt like we should have been 3-0 down, didn't it, really? We were lucky to only be 1-0 down. But I don't know about you, but I did actually always feel that we would come back. And maybe that was just after the Bournemouth game, but I just had the feeling that, no, we can't be this bad all night. And lo and behold, we weren't. But I think it was... we were fortunate that Ramsey got his goal so soon after half-time. And that really reminded us how we can actually play football. And great to see Aaron Ramsey back on the score sheet. Let's hope he starts doing that a bit more often now, because that was his first since March, wasn't it? So it would be really nice to see him get back into a goal-scoring vein of form.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, I agree that we were, with both of you, about we were looking better a little bit as the game went on towards half-time. But it was so important to get that goal so quickly into the second half, because you just think if they hadn't taken advantage of that opportunity, then things might have got a bit trickier, should we say, the longer it went on. I know that's a bit of an obvious thing to say, but getting it so quickly really seemed to change the game completely. And then, of course, we had the second, which Giroud will take all the plaudits for, and quite rightly. But I hadn't realised it at first, but probably my excitement. But the Perez back heel to set him up for it was particularly sweet, I thought.
Yeah, it was fantastic, wasn't it? And showed his worth in that moment. And he's not getting a lot of game time, but when he is playing, he's playing really well. and he was. I thought that without Sanchez, we basically lacked any thrust going forward in the first half. Certainly, that we just had no thrust going forward, did we? And which meant that we didn't get Preston on the back foot. But he he was the one exception to that he was getting forward and he was creating stuff and continued to do so right to the end. So a really good display from him in some ways.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we've got Perez and Giroud, who are, I think we have to say, not fringe players in that sense, but obviously not first 11ers, if I can put it that way. But they are they've both shown their value over the last few games.
Yeah, definitely, and and as it looks like we can get through games without Ozil and Sanchez now, it's good to know that those two are up to it.
Okay, Matt, just a thought on the team, because we haven't discussed the team in detail yet. Obviously, we've mentioned a few names that were there. Any surprises? I thought it was reasonably strong starting 11, really.
Yeah, I thought that too. We spoke last week about whether it would be a strong team or more of a League Cup team, but whether through a lack of options or just through choice, it was a strong team. I don't know if it was just me, but in my head, I had it that Maitland-Niles was a midfielder. I don't know if I've been mistaken all this.
No, I that's what I was thinking. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, he was played out of position.
Yeah, so that was pretty brave, I guess. But with Bellerin picking up an injury in training and Jenkinson and Debussy missing in action, we were clearly without much choice. But apart from that, yeah, it was a strong team. Probably as strong as we could have played, really. Obviously, we're resting Sanchez, but the rest was a strong team throughout. Yeah,
I mean, there's a couple of other positives just to mention, I think. Danny Welbeck coming back, even if it wasn't for anywhere near as long as the commentator seemed to think. Because the guy on BT Sport was convinced he was going to come back about half an hour to go. Now, fair enough, Arsene may well have said that at some point in the week. But obviously, situations change as the game goes on. So he only got 7 minutes plus any injury time, but it was still good to see him back. And avoiding a replay, of course, particularly when you look at someone like Liverpool, who obviously have the League Cup as well, but couldn't get past Plymouth yesterday, and that adds another game to their already busy schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I think however disappointed we are with the first half performance, we've got to be really chuffed that we won that game. And if we'd had the game that Liverpool had and come out with a 0-0 draw by playing a weakened team, which we didn't, then we'd have been in real trouble, and Wenger would be taking a lot of flack. So I think we should be really pleased.
Because Liverpool now have an issue, don't they? I mean, not that we care hugely about other teams' problems, but what kind of team do they play for that replay? They don't want to be losing, surely. But at the same time, it's another game in there, in amongst all their other ones. It's an interesting thing to think what we might have done had we ended up in the same position.
Well, a Liverpool fan I was speaking to today wants out quick.
Oh, okay. So he wouldn't mind a defeat to Plymouth.
He appears to have no interest at all in the FA Cup, and that's it. He just says, "No, I play the weak side, and if we go out, then all the better."
Fair enough, I suppose. I mean, I'm very much a fan of the cup. I think Arsenal have done well. We've won it more than anyone else. But perhaps it's slightly outside of our remit to talk about the value or the sheen, if you like, of the cup. But I did want to mention a potential negative negative that other people have mentioned. I'm not sure it's that big a deal, but there was a bit of this chat afterwards about, in the interview straight afterwards, that Ramsey and Giroud, I can't remember which or both, or indeed it was either of them, talked about they were surprised by the commitment of Preston, and some people picked up on this as some kind of, well, that's not good enough, they should be expecting this kind of thing. I thought it was just a throwaway comment in an interview, and they were sounding polite. I don't know if perhaps I should be giving it a bit more credence. Matt, did you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it stood out to me just because they both said pretty much the exact same thing. I don't know if they were briefed on something before, but they both came out with pretty much the exact same statement. Look, I don't imagine in reality Wenger expected Preston to turn up and not be committed at all. I don't think that was what they were suggesting. I think as Wenger was, I think they're just being, as you said, complimentary, paying. Preston came out and they sort of pressed us high, And although we probably did expect them to do that, I think they kept up those levels for much of the match. So I assume that was probably what they were referring to.
Yeah, that was my thought. Pete, any thought on that, or anything else about the cup in general?
I thought in general that it was an odd comment to make after the game, definitely. But I wondered if what they actually meant, rather than they were surprised about how committed they were, that they were surprised how attacking they were. That maybe they thought they would play a lot more defensively, and that they were going to have to spend a lot of time trying to pick them apart and break them down slowly. And that's why they didn't get into the game very quickly. They were surprised at how forceful Preston were coming at us, and that surprised them rather than commitment, because obviously any side is going to be committed, but maybe they saw it more in a commitment in a Tony Pulis kind of a way.
Yeah, well, I like that idea. I like the idea that actually they just meant they were better than they thought in one way or another. Which is an interesting idea. Well, it's not. It's just interesting that some people really try and analyse that to death, and it just seems to me like it's just a thing people say, and it probably shouldn't be looked at in any great detail. We're doing this on Monday night, and they've just done the draw for the fourth round, and we are away to Southampton or Norwich. Any thoughts on any of that?
I'd like Norwich, please.
Me too.
Yeah, I think that's three of us. I think we know the Southampton can cause us problems. We'll say many more about that game when we get. So, God, I completely missed that on Saturday. Did they? Obviously, they drew. I don't know what the score was in that.
It was 2-2. Southampton conceded in like the 93rd minute, I think.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. So good to know in that we avoided Southampton outright. I don't know why Southampton. We should be so worried about them, but they've become a bit of a problem recent years, I think.
So yeah. It will be faced with the same problem as Liverpool about not knowing what to do in that replay.
Good point. Well, as long as they all get worn out, that's fine. That game will be at the end of January, won't it? So I think that's the last weekend in January is when that's planned for. Of course, I guess they will get shifted around for television for that, particularly if it's Southampton. But okay, let's move on from that then for the moment. We'll save chat about that until nearer the time. One game to preview this week. Swansea away in the league on Saturday. It's Saturday, isn't it? Yeah. As we continue our run of these, what we've called winnable fixtures, which we haven't quite won all of them so far. We haven't lost any yet, although that's a fairly pessimistic approach. Swansea, though, are having a pretty dreadful time. They lost away at Hull in the Cup on Saturday, I think. I have found out some stats about this game. One is that in all our visits to the Liberty Stadium, we've scored. We average 2 goals a game there. And something I found particularly fascinating, in general, this isn't against Swansea necessarily, we have scored the most headed goals in the Premier League, which seems unthinkable for a few years ago, unless that's just my memory playing tricks. So there you are. There's some things to chew on if you want to. But Matt, any thoughts in particular about this Swansea visit?
I would have rather played them a few weeks ago, for sure, when they had Bob Bradley and just refused to defend, really. I don't imagine they're going to be quite so gung-ho this time. But, there's only so much a new manager can do with what's in front of him. And their defence is still very suspect. Going forward, Sigurdsson's obviously their main threat. I feel like we've had a couple of tough trips to Swansea in the past. The likes of Montero have given our fullbacks problems, which could be particularly relevant if Bellerin's not fit in time. But yeah, if we start, it would be nice if we could turn up in the first half for once, and if we do that, then it should be a winnable game.
It should be, Pete. We face new manager syndrome again. Any thoughts on that particular aspect of this game?
We do, and he has, of course, lost his first game actually in charge.
Oh, he has, yes. So we've got
in charge against Hull, so that's good.
Yes, I noticed the Palace game was his first one, wasn't it? I noticed that while they said technically he wasn't in charge, he did appear on the bench at the second half. I don't know if he was just jumping in to take, because they won that game, of course. So I don't know if he actually had anything to do with that at all or not. But officially, he wasn't in charge then. No.
Yeah, imagine he introduced himself at half time.
Yes. That's the way they do it, isn't it? Because he has managed because he's got a big reputation for his success as sort of an assistant, doesn't he, at Madrid and at Munich. But yeah, this is his chance to really make it big, if you like, in the Premier League, which he'll do, of course, by keeping Swansea up. But what do we think then? We should be looking to win this, shouldn't we, even with those various factors in place?
Well, if Hull can beat them 2-0, yeah.
Yes, and I think the point Matt makes about getting off to a good start, or at least not going behind, would be nice. If we can last a little bit of time for that. All right, well, look, we'll leave it there, because that's we don't quite know what team we're going to play yet. It's quite early in the week. We haven't heard any whispers. I mean, we're assuming it'll be a pretty strong team. I think. I don't think we've got any long-term absences.
I imagine Sanchez and Ozil will be back in the team. And do you think Welbs might get on towards the end again?
Well, it might depend on the score, I suppose. I mean, it would be good to see him there. I mean, we're in this unusual position now where we've got a week between the last game and this game, and then another week between the Swansea and Burnley game, and then another week between the Burnley game and whoever we're playing in the Cup. So there's actually plenty of rest for players if needed. But you've got that balancing act about bringing in other players who might want the minutes. The Mustafi thing on against Preston was interesting, because he didn't seem ready for it, but then you think, well, he's going to have to come back at some point, so maybe they thought this was a reasonable time of doing it. So it's just that interesting balance to get, isn't it? And we'll see how it works. It would certainly be nice to see Welbeck for half an hour, but that would be making a substitution with half an hour to go, which is not generally the Arsene Wenger way of doing things. No. All right then, well, let's there's a couple other bits I wanted to mention just to get your views on. We got a report at some point last week, I can't remember when it was, that Cazorla, unfortunately, is going to be out, it seems, for some time now. It's obviously a shame to miss him. Hopefully we've got some players who can fill in that gap. But yeah, I mean, we're talking a few months, I think, and given Arsenal injury time, that could be the end of his season. And am I right in thinking he's 32 now? I'm just wondering what the future holds for him, in terms of Arsenal, at least.
I don't think he is very left on his contract either, so I don't know what the situation with that will be. But in terms of our team for the rest of the season, at the moment, Ramsey and Xhaka are our only real options in midfield. One's very injury prone and the other one's very suspension prone, so not doesn't bode well. We could do with Egypt losing pretty swiftly. It's just about keeping those two fit, I guess, or we change the system. But that seems very unlikely. So I guess we just hope Xhaka and Ramsey stay fit, because if they do, they're both obviously very good players and more than capable of doing a job for us. Maybe we once again go back to wishing Wilshere was not on the south coast.
Yeah, that's certainly something to rue occasionally. But it's funny, you can sort of see his point as to why he went there. At the start of the season, it looked like there was a bit of a logjam in front of him, and then before you know it, a few things here and there, and chances open up. Pete, I think I'm right in saying you're a Cazorla fan, so it would be a shame if we didn't see a bit more of him in red and white at some point in the near future.
It would be terrible, and if we don't see him this season, that's bad enough. But if it's the end of his Arsenal career, then that's terrible news. But I think one thing he must have is longevity. So I hope if he recovers any time this season, that he would still be playing for us next season. And I'm sure that in that situation, maybe he just wouldn't always be the first choice as he currently is, but he would still offer us a fantastic option. We should certainly not wish never to see him again. That would be awful.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully, let's keep fingers crossed it's not quite as bad as it sounds to me. We get to see him at some point in the spring, or even sooner if we're lucky. Two other positive bits to finish on. Yes, I know it meant that Spurs won, but Chelsea ended their winning game record, whatever it was, in the league at 13. So we still have the record of 14. I think I'm right in saying 14 games in a row, which is nice. Looking on the bright side. Perhaps more significantly, just wanted to see what your thoughts were briefly on the Mesut Ozil comments this week in the German Kicker magazine, which I think means it's a magazine for German football fans rather than a magazine for fans of people who like kicking Germans. I hope that's not, there probably is one of those as well in a UKIP bookstore somewhere, but let's not go down there. Very positive comments from him, basically. He seemed to say, and I know it could all be agent stuff, so we have to be slightly careful about taking it all at face value, but wanted to stay at Arsenal, thinks it's all sort of in hand, shouldn't be a big problem. But the thing that came out, I want to ask Matt about this first, is this idea of wanting to know what Arsene Wenger was going to do. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean he wants him to stay. It was that he wanted to have some clarity on what he's doing, which seems like a bit of a tough sell, given that no one really seems to know what he's doing between one year and the next, or between one contract and the next necessarily, although we know he always stays for the end of his contract. I thought it was quite interesting that Ozil brought this up. I hadn't really got that idea of how loyal, for want of a better word, he felt towards the manager.
Yeah, I mean, John Cross jumped to the headlines, which led to a bit of a clash of views amongst people on Twitter, that basically Ozil had said, if Wenger signs, I'll sign, which I don't think was what he was saying at all.
No.
I think he was just saying, as you said, he wanted to know what Wenger's plans were. And I'm not sure it's particularly about loyalty to him as such. I think he just wants, he's 28, I think. This is, if he does sign a contract, this is probably one of his last major ones of his career. So I think it's understandable for him to just want to know if he stayed next season, who would be in charge, what the plans were maybe for bringing other people in. I think it's just pretty natural he'd want assurances, but obviously with the situation around Wenger's contract already being pretty highly contested, this added even more controversy, I guess, to some people.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's an innocent comment in a magazine article, and then people jump into it, and like you say with John Cross and others, you start making things that perhaps weren't quite meant with it. And I think there is such analysis of this stuff that perhaps we do overanalyze this stuff a little bit. So it's just, it was just interesting to get views, and I think yours sort of along the same lines as mine. It'd be great if he stayed, but I can understand he wants to know about what the manager plans, but you wonder if they said, well, the manager's not going to be here, we're going to get so and so, if that would actually, whoever so and so might be, if that would make a difference. Pete, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. They weren't the comments they were reported to be, and we don't even know when he said them. I don't think, do we? That, sometimes these things you find out that they were said a month earlier before the actual article comes out. So who knows? But yeah, you can understand him wanting to have some clarity. Have I ever told you my theory about Wenger and whether he will sign or not?
Yeah, please. Not that I recall. Please share it.
Well, if I'm correct, he's not going to get clarity, because I suspect that Wenger, his decision will be based, I believe, on what he feels is best for the club, and that is going to come down to whether we have found whether the club might have a replacement that he feels is suitable for him, ready to come in. I don't think he feels a lot of loyalty to Arsenal Football Club, and he will stay if the club have not got a suitable replacement lined up, and he may even be advising them on who that replacement might be, possibly, and if so, he'll do a good job of making sure that they do appoint someone suitable. He won't do an Alex Ferguson and say, oh yeah, David Moyes, he'll do.
If he says now David Moyes will do, that would not be a good sign.
Exactly. I really do think that. I think he's ready to go, as it were, but I think he wouldn't go if the club don't have someone lined up to replace him. And I'm not sure that the club do. And I think the club are sitting there thinking, well, if as long as Arsene's willing to stay about, what's the point in going out and finding someone? So I think we probably won't get any clarity on it for quite a long time.
That all sounds very logical. And I don't disagree with it at all. My immediate thought on hearing you put it like that is that there will be lots of people who say that's not good enough. We want him out. there are that minority that's become more and more vocal, perhaps over the years. I think it still is a minority, particularly in terms of people actually at the ground. But there would be people who wouldn't take with your perfectly reasonable assessment and would prefer there to be. I suppose what I'm getting at is they prefer more clarity earlier on. And I think what you're saying, was absolutely right, is it's just going to disappoint. And I'm not saying they're right that it disappoints them, but I think there'll be a large-ish number of fans who would prefer that clarity earlier on.
He's already said that he won't make a decision until the end of the season, though, hasn't he? He has made that clear. I'm trying to express why I believe that is the case, that he's not going to make the decision until a time in which the club knows whether it has got someone ready. And you can't really know that in the middle of a season, can you?
I suppose the thing I'm getting at is could there be a set of circumstances, take an extreme example, a collapse between now and the end of the season, where that decision is taken out of his hands? Or will the club, do you think, always, because of everything he's done in the past, will they always let him choose the moment of his choosing? Or is there somewhere in between? Is there going to be nudges and, little, perhaps it would be not, diplomatic ways out, as it were?
I just think if at the end of his contract, even if it's been an appalling season, if the club haven't found someone decent to replace him, he won't go.
All right, I like that. Sounds logical. Matt, any thoughts on that idea?
I think it definitely makes sense. I think Ferguson saw it sort of. I think he was a lot more self-interested. Like he'd see. I have less of a chance of winning trophies with this squad. It's not as strong, so I'll tap out here. Whereas I think Wenger has a lot more interest, not just in himself, but as in his, not so much his legacy, but just what comes next. As Pete said, he's more interested, I think, in the club as a whole. I don't think there's anything he could do that would lead to the board suggesting he should leave. I think it will always entirely be in his hands, rightly or wrongly. And I do think he'll probably sign another 2-year contract at the end of the season.
Okay, interesting. That would be quite a commitment, I think. But I wouldn't have a massive problem with that unless things really go badly between now and the end of the season. I'd have to question if that was a good idea. But well. I dare say we'll come back to this because I'm sure it's going to be a pretty regular topic between now and the end of the season, potentially. So we'll leave it there for the moment, though. But that was very interesting stuff. So thank you very much, Pete.
Thanks, Matt.
And thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. We will be back next Monday-ish with a review of the, hopefully, relatively comfortable Swansea win at Swansea, but perhaps I shouldn't say that now. But we'll leave it there for now, and we'll speak to you next week. Take care, bye bye.